I am traveling to one of the most remote places in Europe just to read books. Let's start traveling. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Faroe Islands. Now you might have wondered why my name is libraryofaviking. Well, it's because me and my wife were actually from the Faroe Islands, which used to have Vikings here. And for the next 10 days, the plan is literally for me just to relax as much as I possibly can and to read as many books as humanly possible. And what better way to do that than to do a reading challenge? Now, if you didn't know, then the Faroe Islands is connected by 18 islands. And I'm currently based in an island called Eysturoy. But the aim of this challenge is simple. For every island I step my foot on, I need to try and read one book. And the challenge is starting today because actually the airport is on a different island called Vakar, or Vavar as we say in the Faroe Islands. But the challenge is starting today and I'm currently on Eysturoy, which means that as of now I have to try to read one more book. But you might not know this, but the Faroe Islands is very interconnected, so you can actually drive between these islands through subsea tunnels. And this challenge is going to be hard because I'm only going to be in the Faroe Islands for 10 days and I'll definitely step my foot on more than 2 islands easily. But the book I want to read for Eysturoy is I'll just want to finish Until the Last by Mike Shackle, this 770 page chunker that I started a week ago, and I only have around 200 pages left. So let's get reading. And what better way to start a reading challenge than to go on a walk with my wife and find a nice reading spot in the Faroe Islands. Okay, so one thing you'll notice about this reading challenge and vlog is that the most of the books I'm reading will have quite a thematic feel, except the first book I'm reading, because I really tried my very best to actually finish this book before I came to the Faroe Islands. But that book is like almost 800 pages and I started it last week, but I'm almost done with it, which means that I'll finally conclude the Last Word trilogy. And as of now, I have been absolutely loving it, and I only have a bit more than 150 pages to go, so I'll give my full thoughts when I finish it. But if you enjoy grimdark fantasy, and if you're looking for something very underrated, then I can't recommend this trilogy enough. I have loved every single book. I do still think that the second book is the best by far. But yeah, Mike Shackle, I'll definitely read anything he's written, and I absolutely can't wait to pick up the next book, because that book will actually not be a fantasy, but it'll actually be a biography about a person going into the wild, which I thought was very fitting for this reading challenge. Oh, and also, I also love my wife. Okay, so it's still the same day, and I've actually been able to finish Until the Last. I think in the past 48 hours or so, I read around 400 pages, which is something I basically never get around to do, just because of work commitments, family life, and stuff like that. But really, if you're going on annual leave and you're not reading loads and loads and loads, then for the most part, you're probably doing something wrong. Okay, obviously I don't want to generalize, but yeah, I've been able to finish Until the Last, which means I am still on track for this challenge. 1 island visited and 1 book read. Now, I know I kind of already shared my thoughts on the Last Word trilogy, but if I would describe it, then it's kind of like reading a series that mixes Jung Win and Joe Abercrombie, and you get Mike Shackle with the Last Word trilogy. It is gritty, it's grim, it's brutal. If I was to rank this trilogy, I'll probably say book 2 is the best, then book 1, and then book 3. But the third book was still incredibly enjoyable and had a really great twist towards the end of the final act, which I really appreciated. And yeah, I'm just so pleased. It's only been like 1 full day since my annual leave started, and it's been less than 24 hours since I came to the Faroe Islands, and I've already been able to finish a book. Now, I know I did start that book early, but that book was absolutely massive. And later this evening, I'm going to visit my dad, and he lives on a different island. And then tomorrow, I'm going to a 3rd island, so I need to pick up the pace when it comes to my reading. But before I reveal what book I'll pick up next, I think we should do this on a different island. And just like that, I am now on a different island called Streymoy, which is where my mom and dad lives, which means that while I was on top of this challenge yesterday, having visited 1 island and read 1 book, I am now down to visiting 2 islands and having only read 1 book. Okay, I had to move the camera because it was just simply too bright. But yeah, this challenge is gonna get way worse, because I'm actually going to a summer house today, which is on a different island. So we're gonna actually drive to this island through a subsea tunnel again, which means that in only around 2 hours, I will have officially been on 3 islands with only having read 1 book. But what book am I going to be rereading for the next couple of days? Well, I'm not sure if you remember that I said I've chosen books that had like a thematic feel, because the next book I'm going to be reading is Into the Wild by Jon Krakauer. Now, I watched the movie a couple of times many years ago and I really enjoyed it. It's about this guy that's basically looking for meaning in life, and he goes out into the wilderness. And what better place to read this book than the Faroe Islands, which is in the middle of nowhere. I do apologize, my camera keeps shaking a bit because it's so windy. But yeah, I've heard amazing things about this book, and this is also relatively short, and it's also a memoir, which is not something I read that often, so I'm actually really looking forward to this one. And yeah, for the next couple of days, I'm going to be spending time with my family on the island of Sandoy, and I just can't wait to dive into this one. But as of now, it's 2 islands visited and 1 book read, but I'm pretty confident I'll be able to read this one relatively quickly. We then drove to the island of Sandoy through the new undersea tunnel. Fun fact, I actually ran through this tunnel when it opened last year with my wife. Now, the island of Sandoy only has a population of 1,200 people, so that's around 2% of the Faroe Islands, but it's still very much worth visiting. We then arrived at Sandoy at this very cute summer house, and I started reading Into the Wild. And the day after, we went on a hike, and it was so beautiful. And guess what? We actually got to see some puffins. Guys, are you seeing this? The view is absolutely insane, and the sun is actually shining for once, which basically never happens. And you know, the craziest thing, literally right behind this camera, I'll try to see if I can get it. There are so many puffins. Look at them. They're literally right next to me. They're so cute. I mean, who doesn't love puffins? They are absolutely adorable. Okay, but enough about puffins. So, I am currently on the island of Sandoy, which is my 3rd island on this trip. And yesterday I started Into the Wild by Jon Krakauer. Now, I'm not sure if you've seen the movie. It's a great movie, but I was quite surprised because this book actually starts with the climax. We kind of get to know what happened to this man on the cover at the very start of this book, which almost feels like a major spoiler, because if you've seen the movie, what happened to this man is like one of the most emotional things, and that's at the end of the movie. But here, it's literally on the first page. But I'm not gonna spoil it in case anyone's watching that just wants to watch the movie. But yeah, I'm only around 30 pages into this novel, and it's kind of written like a journalist that is trying to investigate what happened to this man, who were the people that he met on the journey, and I'm actually quite enjoying it. As you know, I primarily read fantasy, and this is quite a nice pace. And also, being in the Faroe Islands, reading something called Into the Wild, it just feels very, very fitting. But yeah, I've had a wonderful time so far in the Faroe Islands. Just being in the summer house, enjoying my time with my family, and just relaxing so much has been absolutely wonderful. So yeah, hopefully I'll get to read lots and lots more today, and I'll let you know my thoughts when I've actually finished this book. But guys, look at this view. This is literally a dream for any reader. It's just so beautiful. My family's up there. Hello. But yeah, we're just gonna be chilling a bit more here up on the mountain. I'm gonna be looking at the puffins, and I'm gonna do some reading. Guys, I think I might have made a mistake. Now, you know this challenge is that for every island I visit, I have to read 1 book. And today I was hanging out with my friends, and we decided to come to an island called Boroid for a nice trip to go to the spa. But when I made this challenge originally, I didn't even think about it. I might actually end up on a totally different island, which means that I'm currently now on 4 islands. And the airport I'm going to is actually on a different island, which means that I will definitely end up on 5 islands. And there's just no way I can read 10 books in that period of time. The good news is that I actually finished Into the Wild, which means that I'm now currently on 4 islands visited with 2 books read. And I love this book. It was very different from what I expected. Now, while this book is about Alex, the protagonist, most of you will probably know from the movie if you watched it, the book is actually much more about people that have the sense of there's more to life, and they're willing to go to extreme lengths to actually just find that purpose. And throughout this novel, there's different stories about different people that have gone into the wild to look for higher meaning, and it just filled me with sadness, because in a lot of ways I can actually really relate to Alex, the protagonist. Basically throughout my whole life, I have struggled with meaning in life, even though I grew up in a religious context, having heard about Jesus, having gone to church, and also finding great purpose in Jesus and Christianity. I have struggled a lot with doubt, and from time to time I've had this question: what is really gonna fulfill my life and make my life worth living? Now, while reading this book, I really wish that I just could have actually talked to Alex and actually shared my experience, because even though I've had so many struggles, so many doubts, I've always come back to Jesus. I genuinely feel like he's the only one that has really made my life worth living, and it's also the reason why I'm so happy and so glad. And while I might not have been able to convince Alex of following Jesus and finding a purpose in him, I really wish I could have just had prayed with him and told him about it. But that means that I've now officially read 2 books, and I don't know if you remember earlier in this video, I talked about the books I'm going to be reading do have a bit of a thematic feel, because the next book I'm going to be starting is Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. I've had this book on my TBR for so long, and this book is around 400 pages, so just finishing this book might be a bit of a challenge, but I'm quite confident I'm going to be able to finish this one. But I think the prospect of me actually reading 2 more books is limited, but I'll give it my very best. But yeah, I feel like Into the Wild and Jurassic Park, they kind of fit this trip. And I even have one more book that I brought with me that also definitely fits this theme of going into the wild. We then went to the island of Streymoy and visited the capital, Tórshavn. Tórshavn is definitely worth visiting if you ever come here, but it's quite small, especially considering it's the capital. But the thing I wanted to draw your attention to is the second-hand bookshop in the capital. Basically, no one works in it. Almost all the books cost 5 krona, which is less than a US dollar, and you just put the money in this pot if you want a book. It is a super cool concept and definitely worth a visit. Okay, so it's been 3 days since I made the last clip, and we actually drove to the island of Estroy and then back to Streymoy, which are 2 islands I've already been on. So for the past 3 days, I've actually been on the island of Streymoy, where the capital is, and I've spent so much time with family. Whenever I come to the Faroe Islands, which is where I grew up, I have so much family to visit, and I barely had any time to read. But yesterday, I actually did find 2-3 hours where I had nothing planned, and I was able to do some proper reading of Jurassic Park. So now I'm around halfway through, and I think most of you that are watching this will probably have seen the movie. And I have watched, I think, all of the movies, and I watched the original Jurassic Park so many years ago, so I definitely need to rewatch it. But yeah, this book, it's absolutely brilliant. So this is actually my first Michael Crichton book, and what I love here is that there is like sciencey jargon in here, but it's quite easy to follow, and especially like the conversation or discussion about chaos theory, which is basically the theory of that there are some things in our universe, in lives, that are basically just too hard to actually predict what the outcome will be. And the overall concept of Jurassic Park is that they have this island, they've been able to bring back dinosaurs, and they basically say, well, it's safe because we have these statistical models and we're able to predict what is going to happen and so on. While other people come in and say, well, have you heard about chaos theory? Basically talks about that if we have even small deviations in a statistical model, then over time the changes will be so big and massive that a catastrophe will happen. So an example is like the weather. Even to this day, we're trying our very best to predict what the weather will be, but we all know that if we go further than maybe 2-3 days, there is a very high likelihood that there might be some massive changes in our predictions just because of tiny factors might have been slightly off when we did the calculation, right? So that's one of the big focus in Jurassic Park, is almost this critique of humans trying to control and predict what nature and the universe will be like, because when a model is big enough, these tiny deviations will make a huge difference. But yeah, the pacing is also spot on. It's very engaging. So I'm halfway through, and yesterday when I had 2 hours, I was able to read like 150 pages in one sitting, because this book just hooks you. So I'm very glad I'm actually reading this one. And you might remember that I actually talked about the books I picked kind of have a thematic feel, because if I'm able to finish Jurassic Park, I want to start And the Skyblade by S. Hattie. Now, Serana Host, she's both on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. She has published this book with Bindery Books, so I have received an ARC here, and this is a climate fantasy, which I'm not sure if I've ever read a climate fantasy before, but yeah, this cover is absolutely gorgeous, and I basically know nothing about this book, except that Serana Host has definitely hyped this book online, so we will see, because actually at the end of this island, I have to go to the airport, which is on a different island, which means that I will have visited 5 different islands during this challenge, and I'm only halfway through book 3, so I'm definitely gonna fail this challenge. And currently in Faroe Islands, today and tomorrow is our national holiday, which is a time where people dress up in national dresses and you spend lots of time with family and friends, and I don't think I'm gonna have lots of time to read, but hopefully I can at least finish Jurassic Park, and if I have time, I also want to read And the Skyblade. We then drove back to the island of Streymoy to celebrate Ólavsøka, the national holiday in the Faroe Islands. During the celebration, we dress up in our national clothes. There are lots of cultural events taking place and art galleries, and it's a perfect opportunity to catch up with people you haven't seen in a while. Ólavsøka was definitely one of the highlights of this trip. Okay, yellow I am. Okay, so it's officially 11 p.m. in the Faroe Islands, and we are heading back to the UK tomorrow with the earliest plane, and the airport is on the island of Voar, which is conveniently also where my grandparents live. They literally live a 5-minute drive away from the airport. I'll try to find some beef footage because this island is absolutely beautiful. If you come to the Faroe Islands, it's definitely worth doing some sightseeing here because it is stunning. The bad news is that this means that officially I have been to 5 different islands in the Faroe Islands out of 18, and unfortunately I didn't go to any of the islands where no people live. But the only real silver lining is that I was able to finish Jurassic Park today, literally the day before we actually go back, and I really enjoyed this. Now I will say I think the first third of this novel is probably the best, because just the overall exploration of the concept, setting up the discussions of the theories and stuff like that was just so fascinating. And then definitely the second half of this novel is way more action-packed, but still very enjoyable. So just to wrap up, Onto the Last by Mike Shackle, a brilliant conclusion to a brilliant trilogy. Into the Wild, probably one of my favorite novels I read this year. It's a non-fiction and it's definitely stuck with me emotionally, and yeah, it's It's very short. I would recommend it. And Jurassic Park, definitely very glad I finally read this novel. I've had it on my TBR for so long. And Surround, if you're watching this, I do apologize. I never got around to reading And the Sky Bled, this climate fantasy, which sounds so fascinating. So we will see. Hopefully I can actually pick it up next month. But at the time of recording this video, I'm literally going to start The Captain by Will White, which is the book for August for our Page of Viking book club. And I'm so excited to check this one out. I really struggle with Cradle by Will White, the first book in the Cradle series, which is so popular. So hopefully this novel will actually really vibe with me, because I really want to enjoy his work, obviously. The good news is I read 3 books and I've actually really enjoyed all 3 of them, because I was kinda in a bit of a reading slump, but I just forced myself to read more, which you will know if you actually watch my other vlog. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this bit of a different vlog. I also want to give a special thanks to all my patrons who literally support what I do here. If you watch my channel, then you know that I basically have spent all my Patreon income for the past year or so on video editing. At the moment, I am spending between $200 to $300 on video editing, which accounts to around between 2 to 3 videos. And my hope and dream for this challenge is to get all my videos edited. So if you want to support what I do here and join the exclusive Viking book club, then I'll put a link in the description down below. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Bye!